Have you ever wondered what would happen if one day you simply decided to step back? Not physically disappear, but emotionally and mentally detach from the people, the expectations, and the roles you play in the lives of others. What if you took a break, not out of anger or resentment, but simply because you needed time for yourself? For many, this thought may seem strange or unsettling. After all, people are used to having us around, and we are often tied to others by invisible strings of obligation and need. But what happens when those ties break, when you decide to withdraw? This isn't about abandoning anyone. It's about stepping away to reconnect with yourself. And believe it or not, when you do this, the world around you may shift in ways that you can't even imagine. The absence you create isn't just about them missing you, it's deeper. It challenges their perceptions, their insecurities, and their sense of self. When you decide to step away from someone's life, it's not just about leaving them physically absent. There's something more profound at play here. You're leaving behind a void, and that void isn't just empty space. It's uncomfortable. It forces them to confront something they'd rather ignore, something they don't want to face. Think about it. You've probably heard someone tell you how much they need you, how important you are to them. But have you ever noticed how these words often seem more about them than about you? They need you, but why? Because, whether they admit it or not, you serve a purpose in their lives that has little to do with you as a person and more to do with what they need you to be. When you step away, it's not just your presence they miss. It's the role you played in their life, the role they relied on to help stabilize their own world. Your absence doesn't just create an empty space, it shakes their emotional foundation. And the thing is, it's not about what you were to them, but about what they can no longer project onto you. The truth is, people don't see you for who you truly are. They see you for what they need you to be. You are, in many ways, a mirror for them, a reflection of their own insecurities, desires, and expectations. When you step away, you're not just missing from their lives physically. You're breaking the mirror that they've been using to project their image of themselves onto. It's unsettling, isn't it? The realization that so many relationships are based not on true connection, but on emotional dependency. People depend on you not because they love you or genuinely care, but because your presence helps them avoid facing parts of themselves. And when you step away, when you leave, you're forcing them to confront the truth. Their emotional stability was never truly grounded in you, but in the idea of you. This can be a hard pill to swallow, because when you decide to step back, you make others face an uncomfortable question. What's left of me if you're no longer here? And that question can stir up all sorts of emotions: anger, guilt, sadness, fear, confusion. But at its core, it's a reflection of something much deeper. They don't know who they are without you in their lives. Once you've made the decision to step away, the people you've left behind start to reconstruct the narrative about you. But here's the twist: this narrative is no longer about who you really are, but about who you were in their lives. It's as if they try to fill the void you've created with versions of you that don't even exist. They analyze your behavior, your words, your past actions, trying to find some explanation for why you made the decision to leave. But here's the thing: they're not really trying to understand you. What they're really searching for is a way to justify themselves. You see, your absence forces them to confront something they were avoiding: their emotional dependence on you. And that's not easy to admit. Many people pride themselves on being self-sufficient, independent, and strong. The idea that they might have relied on someone else, perhaps more than they were willing to acknowledge, threatens that image. And so, they begin to reshape how they see you. Some will idealize you, romanticizing your presence in their life, making you out to be perfect and irreplaceable. Others, though, will demonize you. They'll convince themselves that your decision to leave was selfish or even a betrayal. It's easier for them to blame you than to admit that you leaving destabilized them in ways they didn't want to face. What's fascinating about these reactions is how they aren't uniform. People respond to your absence in very different ways, depending on what you represented in their lives. For some, your absence feels like an open wound, a raw, painful reminder of something they've lost. For others, it's a wound they thought had healed, but that you've reopened with your departure. And for a few, it's even deeper. Your absence reflects their greatest fear, being alone with themselves. At first, the reactions might be anger, confusion, or disbelief. They might wonder why you left, what went wrong, or if you'll come back. But as time goes on, something interesting happens. The absence becomes less tangible. It's no longer just about the physical space you've left behind. It turns into a deeper, more abstract feeling. They begin to question whether they really knew you at all. Were you the person they thought you were, or had they been projecting their own needs and desires onto you all along? This doubt, this uncertainty, can be even more unsettling than the absence itself. It's the kind of question that gnaws at them from the inside, forcing them to rethink everything they thought they knew about you and, by extension, about themselves. The real underlying tension here is the loss of control. People don't always understand why your departure affects them so much. In their minds, you weren't that crucial, not that important. But the moment you leave, the void you create shines a light on the cracks in their emotional foundation, cracks they may not have even realized existed. Your absence isn't just a hole in their lives. It's a disruption to their sense of stability. You see, relationships, even the most casual ones, create patterns that become predictable, even comforting. And when you step away, you break those patterns. The balance shifts, and in that moment, everything they thought was solid starts to feel uncertain. The routine they depended on falls apart, and with it, their sense of control over their world. This loss of control is one of the most powerful emotions people experience when you step away. It's not about what you've done, but about how their world now feels out of alignment. It's uncomfortable, it's unsettling, and it forces them to face a truth they'd prefer to ignore. They depended on you more than they were willing to admit. What's truly ironic is that, in many cases, the people who react to your absence often don't fully understand why it affects them so much. In the heat of the moment, they might try to rationalize it, telling themselves that you didn't matter that much, that it's just temporary, or that they can move on without you. They might even convince themselves that your absence doesn't change anything. But deep down, they know something's different. Something has shifted, and that sense of discomfort and uncertainty grows. Your departure forces them to reevaluate not only the space you occupied in their life, but also their own identity. When we spend time with someone, especially in close relationships, there's a blending of energies. Their presence becomes intertwined with yours. They may not even realize it, but you become a part of how they define themselves, their daily routines, and even their emotional stability. So when you step away, it's not just that they lose you, they lose a piece of themselves. They need to figure out who they are without you in the picture. And that process is complicated and often painful. It's not just about missing your presence, it's about reconstructing their own sense of self without the emotional anchor they unknowingly relied on. What happens next is almost poetic. As time passes, the people you've left behind begin to reshape their memories of you. But here's the twist: they don't remember you for who you truly were. Instead, they start to construct versions of you that fit their own needs and narratives. Some will idealize you, making you into someone perfect and irreplaceable, someone they never truly valued until it was too late. Others will demonize you, turning you into the villain in their story, convinced that your departure was a selfish act, even a betrayal. This is where the complexity deepens because, in reality, these perceptions have nothing to do with you. They are merely projections of their own emotions, fears, and unmet needs. And for a few, the bravest ones, there may be a moment of clarity. Perhaps I never truly understood what they needed. But that moment is rare, and it requires self-awareness that many aren't willing to confront. Instead, most people will wrestle with their emotions, their confusion, and their growing sense of loss. You've become an enigma in their mind, a mystery they can't solve. They wonder what you're doing, what you're thinking, if you miss them. They create scenarios in their heads, seeking answers to the questions they can't ask. But what's truly unsettling for them is the lack of control. By stepping away, you've broken a pattern they thought was unbreakable, and that disruption creates chaos. Now, here's the most intriguing part. While they are wrestling with their feelings, trying to make sense of your departure, you two are undergoing your own process. Stepping away is not a simple act of putting distance between you and others. It's an act of courage. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, I need space for myself, even if it means that others may not understand your need. And as necessary as it is, this step can be terrifying. Perhaps in your own life, you've found yourself stepping away from someone or something, and in doing so, watched parts of your world crumble. Or perhaps you've experienced someone stepping away from you, and you're left trying to understand why. Regardless of where you stand, the truth is that this process of withdrawal is not just a change in circumstances, it's a catalyst for both sides. On one hand, it forces the people around you to face their own vulnerabilities and dependencies. On the other, it also forces you to confront your own desires, needs, and boundaries. Stepping away from someone doesn't just transform their life, it changes yours as well. And that transformation, while often uncomfortable, can be the beginning of a profound shift toward emotional growth and independence for both sides. There's a deeper truth about stepping away that many don't want to admit. Sometimes, the greatest act of kindness you can offer someone is the gift of independence. By stepping back, by allowing others to stand on their own, you show them that they can survive, that they can adapt, and that their emotional stability doesn't have to depend on your presence. This, while painful in the short term, can be the most liberating thing for them. Your absence can trigger a process of growth, not just for you, but for those you leave behind. It forces them to build a life without the emotional crutch they relied on. And while it may take time for them to see it, in the long run, your departure might be the most important lesson they'll learn, the realization that they are capable of standing on their own. This truth is hard to swallow, especially when the emotional ties are strong. But remember this, by allowing someone to go through the discomfort of your absence, you are often giving them the space they need to grow. And sometimes, this growth is the greatest gift you can offer. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your decision to step away is more powerful than it seems. While it may be uncomfortable, it holds the potential for transformation for both you and those around you. When you step away from someone, you're not just leaving an empty space. You're giving them the chance to face their own emotions, to come to terms with their dependencies, and to rebuild their lives in a way that no longer relies on your presence. But this process isn't one-sided. You, too, will undergo a transformation. Stepping away is not just about distancing yourself from others, it's about reconnecting with yourself. It's about understanding your own needs, your own boundaries, and your own path to emotional independence. This experience, though painful, can teach you valuable lessons about who you are and what you need. And it can also teach others that growth often comes from discomfort, and that sometimes the best way to help someone is by showing them that they can stand on their own defeat. As you reflect on this, I want to leave you with a quote by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. When you step away, you're not just letting go of others, you're giving yourself the freedom to find your own why, to rediscover what you need, and to live life on your own terms.